everyone, Leifried here, and today I have Animal Farm. Now the first thing, I was in this custom bookstore, I guess, or the special bookstore, and I saw this cover and I thought, oh, this is just absolutely beautiful with the red and gold and black, you know, kind of design. On the back it has like a rooster. I just thought, you know, if there's any edition of Animal Farm to pick up, this is the one. And so I just had to get this. I don't know if this is a custom binding, but it certainly doesn't seem super official. It seems like made from a lot of inspiration and a lot of artistry, regardless. The other thing that you will notice is that it is incredibly thin. This book is about 100 pages long or so. It's very, very short. Oh, it even came with a very nice tassel, as you can see. And so basically this is George Orwell's, I guess, other, you know, I don't know all of his work, but this is his other one about political systems that is meant to be super, super simple, almost like a fairy tale story. And I think it really succeeds at this. I actually really like this a lot more than 1984. I felt 1984 is a bit more, I don't know, like a bit more detailed. While with this one, he was able to be a bit more generalized, and obviously everything is metaphorical. And at the beginning, this is kind of painfully predictable, like, you know, the horses are the dumb but able worker, the pigs are the intelligent yet conniving and greeting bunch, the dogs are, you know, the vicious, angry kind of type of people. And so pretty much for the most part, it's kind of like, okay, you know, oh, this big-brained analogy, but it really comes to, together at the end, where I really like what they do at the end. It's very poetic, if anything, and it's actually a pretty decent story. But yeah, I read this in like an afternoon. This, like, you know, I'm starting to love shorter books that I can just go through. I can do one sitting, and my idea is that if I can do a book in a day, like, I kind of go for it. I mean, because otherwise it's like, okay, well, you know, we're on chapter 375 of whatever, you know. And sometimes I am into that. I am into those long, arduous journeys to the top of the mountain of peak, to the peak of mountain knowledge or something, so I can get some piece of relevant information to bring back. But I would highly recommend this, actually, for a couple of reasons. I think specifically to what, you know, just now in general, I think this is actually very relevant as to what happens and how things occurred. And so what this book really is about is, I believe it mirrors or is mirroring the Soviet Union. And so essentially what occurs in the book in actuality is that there is this farm called the Manor Farm, and you have the owner there, Mr. Jones, who lives with his wife or whatever, and he lives in his house and he takes care of the animals, he feeds them and whatever. And he kind of also, you know, he does all the normal, it's a normal farm basically. And basically you have, at the beginning, there's this one pig called Major, and so it's describing, you know, every animal and how they were. And there's this one pig called Major who makes up this song called The Beasts of England, which is, you know, kind of like, you know, the international anthem of the communists. And so he essentially speaks of this vision, of this promise, and of this dream that one day all the animals will be free, and they'll rise up and defeat, you know, Mr. Jones, and they will be free essentially to take to their own affairs, that they don't need to be governed or controlled. And so it also goes over the descriptions of the other animals. So you have, you had Moses, the old crow, who would talk about Sugar Candy Mountain, and so he's kind of like the priest character, which I find very funny. But when they started having Moses talk about Sugar Candy Mountain, maybe with the obvious biblical name, which should be obvious, this is the preacher character, but all I could think of was like YouTube shorts and animation, specifically like things like Charlie the Llama and Candy Mountain. Like I burst out laughing when I read it, that because Sugar Candy Mountain sounds like a made-up meme thing, but that's an analogy for heaven basically. And so you have each one of these kinds of characters, and how they you know, portray themselves, again, reflects their animal behavior. You have the donkey who is, he says something like, you know, I've never seen donkeys live long, and I've never seen a dead one. So he's just one of these characters that just kind of looks about and goes about, doesn't complain about anything. You have Boxer the horse, who is a hard worker, wants to help everybody, but is very stupid. You have the sheep, who just follow orders, obviously. And yeah, the pigs. The pigs are the main one. The pigs are the ones who are very smart, very conniving, and also very ruthless, as we will see. And so basically, like, the smartest animal is the one that seems to really be the one that is the most vicious. And of course, the tagline for Animal Farm is that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. So what happens in this story? It was, Major died, he passed away, and then very soon there were a bunch of other pigs plotting and scheming. There was three main pigs, Napoleon, Snowball, and Squealer, or Squeaker? I think Squealer. And so essentially what they do is, well, they're doing their plotting, but just by happenstance, essentially, there's this one night where Mr. Jones, I believe, he got really drunk or something, and he basically ended up falling, or I actually forget, honestly. But anyway, he loses control of the farm, and the animals surround him and oust him. And they've been rallied by the other pigs, who are using this song to help rally them, and called Beasts of England. Beasts of England will be free, kind of thing. And so they oust, Mr. Jones. And that's very much kind of like, the ousting of the Tsar in the October Revolution. And so from there on in, they're like, okay, now we're free to manage our own affairs. And from that point on, it's all the pigs who are really running the show. And so Napoleon and Snowball are kind of the main leaders. And so they basically draft up this thing which says, more or less, that humans can never be trusted, humans are evil, and basically 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. And then they had to immediately amend that because, because birds have 2 legs, but they made some kind of weird clarification that, technically because their wings serve as a function of movement rather than a manipulative, destructive hand of man, it is actually 4 legs which birds have. So they're like, all right, sure. And so they have to intellectualize and sort of justify the state of things rather than following their own ideology. So it's really a story about how these animals are highly idealistic. They create this draft, this documentation, and instead of following the theories and ideals in the documentation to create a perfect society, they essentially end up kind of living according to their own rules and nomenclature, at least the new ruling class does, and then making up rules and commandments that basically change over time to basically fit those rules. So for example, so basically the pigs become, they say, oh no, now everyone will be equal, but we all have to do labor. And their big goal is they want to build a windmill that will act as a source of electricity and become this hydroelectric dam, basically, which will provide for them energy, and no one will have to work only like three days of the week. And all the while, essentially, the humans and Mr. Jones comes back, and it's basically the neighboring farms of the humans act like the United States and Europe. And so essentially what happens is they kind of at first don't even recognize the new state. They still call it Manor Farm instead of Animal Farm, which is the new name that Napoleon gives it. And so what essentially occurs is that the humans actually try to attack, they try to invade, and they take their guns and their whatever, and they go into the thing. But apparently Napoleon is able to read, and the animals can read and talk now. And somehow they were able to find out. He said he read the Chronicles of Julius Caesar, found out strategies, led them into multiple traps, and basically defeated the humans. And even Boxer, who sadly kicks one of the young boys who was with the humans, and he accidentally kills him, and he says he died and never meant to do that. And then the pigs say, oh no, it was justified because it was for the cause of animalism and the revolution, and for Animal Farm, as we now call it. And so they create up a song, a flag, a ceremony where they show up every morning to have debates and preaching, and Snowball and Napoleon would always disagree and argue, and they love to argue. And so what slowly happens is that in this new regime, things just start to get much worse than when Mr. Jones was around. And it's very obvious because, it's a farm, so it's very easy for us to understand. So, they started the whole revolution with the idea that chickens should not be forced to overproduce their eggs and sacrifice their offspring. Animals should not be needlessly slaughtered. How evil is it that an animal is raised only to be slaughtered, and cows are basically milked? Well, then eventually turns out, well, the cows are actually aching in their udders, that they need to be milked at some point. Otherwise, the milk, can't. Regardless if the milk is used or not, the cows are in pain. Number two, if an animal grows old, it dies anyway. And they start realizing that all the things that they vilified Mr. Jones for, they're kind of not even really, better than it. And of course, what happens is, again, because the pigs are the one that can read and write, they're able to draft up, this document, which is called the Seven Commandments. And they go to the barn door after the Battle of the Cowshed, as they call it, and they write on the barn door essentially 7 commandments detailing, the 7 rules that they shall never break. So it's like, okay, this is our doctrine. So they have all these things to build a country, basically, or a farm in this case. And some of the doctrines are like an animal will never converse with a human or treat a human as an ally. An animal will never drink alcohol as a human. An animal will never sleep in a bed like a human. And other things like, animals are, no animal will kill another animal. And the final rule is that all animals are equal. And so, as time goes on, what's really funny is, all these metaphors for other historical events. So, for example, what happens is, Napoleon does not like Snowball. And so what Napoleon does is there's a new litter of puppies that is born, and he basically takes this litter and he raises them in secret. And so by the time that they're fully developed, they're full-on hounds. And so as hounds, he's able to use their force and brutality to surround Snowball and basically chase him out of Animal Farm. And around this whole time, they've been planning on how to build the windmill, how to make people's lives easier. And once, Napoleon's only opposition was gone, he was able to, lead as a dictator without competition, essentially. And so the windmill, is something that it's funny because they get to the point where say, oh, well, Napoleon took up the point of he's going to oppose the windmill and he's fighting against Snowball. But really, in secret, he actually wanted to design it, but he wanted it to be his design. He wanted total control. And so he starts making up justifications for why he does what he does. And literally, it's just like a very childish, humanish thing where they make up things, or eventually, the pigs, Napoleon and his fellow pigs, and there's also other pigs, I find this interesting, there's other pigs within the regime, within the farm, who are kind of the main pigs who spoke up to Napoleon, and right after Snowball is, ousted, those pigs are also rounded up and their throats are torn out and killed. And Snowball is obviously, I would say, some kind of like Trotsky kind of character. And in that form of execution, a bunch of other animals were also executed for, under confession to falsely collaborating with Snowball. And so, the animals, even in their time, Mr. Jones' time, they had never seen such a slaughter of so many animals, because so many animals after that were just killed and killed and killed. Anyone who suspected of being Snowball's ally or sympathizing with him was basically rounded up and killed or brought forward. And they even had things where the chickens had dreams that they had complied with Snowball and his schemes, and they were put to death by the dogs. And so again, it becomes this thing where Snowball actually becomes a recurring character, where everything from they start building the windmill and the prototype, and the foundation gets destroyed, it gets knocked over in a storm, and basically everything from infiltrations to bad crops to lack of food, everything is blamed on Snowball. That Snowball's somehow behind the scenes plotting the destruction of Animal Farm, and that Snowball, who had fought valiantly at the Battle of the Cowshed, had actually, in fact, been complicit and conspiring with the humans and Mr. Jones all along, even before then, and because Snowball was jealous and envious of the other animals. And so they turned Snowball, who at this point has completely left, into some kind of heinous villain, and that Snowball was sneaking in and sowing bad seeds into their crops and destroying them and sabotaging Animal Farm. And he becomes this cartoonish villain, basically, built out of paranoia and extremism. And so there's that aspect. And then soon, even though Napoleon takes out those first 4 pigs, then there's a lot more pigs that are being born. Napoleon himself is kind of, as he gets older, he realizes, oh, you know what, the human house is actually pretty comfortable, and it's kind of nice to sleep in the bed. And they find a keg of beer and whiskey in the basement. And they start imbibing. And what's really interesting is that as they start changing their behavior and their standards, before anyone notices, they revise the rules on the barn. So it says things like an animal shall not drink, and then suddenly there's a new bit, to excess. I shall not sleep in a bed with covers. And suddenly all these little exceptions and bending of the rules are being made for, this new heroic class of pigs, basically. And the whole labor part, everyone has to work equal amounts a day, but the pigs, however, their labor is planning and creating the right environment for the farm. And so their entire enterprise is essentially, their labor is thinking and planning and doing no labor, essentially, while the dog's labor is supervising the work. So, this is kind of the state of things and sort of the naturalized corruption that is happening. And you see how people with even good intentions or bold intentions or evil intention from the start, how easy it is for them to manipulate the weaker masses. And really what it was, it's not only being intelligent, but also being ruthless and also, frankly, paranoid and manipulating the other animals into doing their bidding. And it's very easy to manipulate animals that are stupider. It talks about, it's really funny, the way it measures intelligence in the animals, I love this, is how well they can recite the alphabet. And while the pigs can read and write fluently, there were other animals that, could only get all the alphabet. Some of them could sound out a certain word. Others could just, read enough, like to know the letters, but not actually make any words. And then characters like Boxer the horse, he's able to put his hoof in the ground and make A, B, C, D. But then if he goes after that for 4 more letters, he gets the first 4. And so he can only learn 4 letters at a time. But he's a hard-working horse. And so, it just becomes this state in which the delusions of the people are all for the state and all for Animal Farm. And as things get worse and worse and worse, the government or the pigs keep bringing up these illusions and lies to make people believe that things aren't as bad as what they are, or that people, are essentially lying, that things are much better than they have ever been since before the time in Jones's life, and things are actually progressing much nicer and cleaner. And there's one really tragic scene where I would say the main character of the story might be Boxer the horse, because he's the one who's mainly working. And so there's this whole thing around the windmill. The first windmill gets halfway done, it falls over. The second windmill, they actually build it, and then a bunch of humans come and blow it up. And so each time, like, Boxer has to keep working, and because they don't have the right tools in order to, destroy or create or break open, the rocks and, to make them, they have to trade for tools. And so they have to start doing things like, selling lumber and trading with the other farms that are still run by humans, which again breaks another commandment, which is that thou shalt never talk to human. And so they start trading with them, and then this whole thing where they have this pile of lumber that Napoleon says, I'll never sell that whatsoever to any human ever, but eventually he, like, immediately a week later does exactly that to get money for the tools that they need. And so, it's like, it's for the good of the people. And the whole atmosphere of the whole farm becomes this thing where Napoleon says, well, you're not allowed to drink, and you're not allowed to do this, and you're not allowed to do X, Y, and Z, because we know better, because we're looking out for you. It's for your own benefit, because we are just more intelligent than you. Therefore, we can take care of you. And again, all animals are equal, but, we're the ones that are just best at, thinking for you. And if we can think for you, we can explain your lives. And so there are certain things like, the Holodomor is like when a bunch of potatoes freeze in the ground and they have a total food shortage. And so therefore they make the chickens overproduce eggs, which is like way worse than it was in Jones's time. And a lot of these a lot of the animals start to, as time goes on, they start to forget what it even was like before the revolution, and how better or worse things are. They totally forget, and they keep saying, one of the lines he brings back is that, Napoleon is always right, labor is good, and you don't want Jones to return. So those are three things they say, and all the animals kind of nod in agreement, like, yeah, okay, sure. And they just kind of go along with it. And the one thing that I think is most famous in this book, or most quoted, is there's a slogan they teach the sheep. And so whenever they have like a protest or a problem, they always get the sheep to come out, who stamp their feet and say, four legs good, two legs bad. And they just keep saying that for apparently 15 minutes on end. Even during debates when no one else is listening to them, they just repeat it as much as they can, because that's just what they've been taught to do, throughout their whole lives, essentially. And so, yeah. What other kind of events? The whole part where they pay for the parts for the windmill, but they get fake banknotes, and so they go to war again, and they have a second battle. I'm not actually sure what that's supposed to mean. Maybe like buying fake ICBMs or something, I don't know. And of course what happens is, so back to Boxer, because he really has the hardest part in the story. So, it's always like he's working more and more, and he's not very smart, but he says, and Napoleon says it's right, but, what really starts turning people is when, he says that Snowball was actually a traitor, and he says, no, we all remember Snowball fighting valiantly, like he was our hero. It's like, nope, Snowball was always a traitor, and always a traitor to the revolution. And so some people, they don't rebel, but they just kind of think it's weird. And even Boxer says, I just don't believe it. And so, but anyway, Boxer, what ends up happening to him is he starts doing labor for the third windmill, basically. And he's so overexhausted, and he knows he's like 2 years close, or like a month away from retirement, basically, and his pension, which had been promised him. And in that month, basically, and it was funny that even though everyone said they had pensions, no one had actually ever retired. It's kind of like, do as I say, but not as I do kind of thing. And so they said they could retire, but no one actually did. And so Boxer, he's close to retirement, he's working out in the mountains, and he trips and falls and basically bleeds to death. And the next day, there's the cart that pulls up that says, that brings up Boxer to take him away, and people say, and Napoleon says, Boxer's leaving, and they all rush out to see him, like, Boxer, we're going to see you, goodbye. And they think he's Oh, actually, sorry, he's not dead yet, actually. He's just kind of lame at this point. He just can't walk anymore. He's basically crippled, and, you know, they nurse him back to health. And, but now he's put in this wagon, and, you know, the animals say, what does the wagon say? And I forget who, I think Muriel the sheep or something says, oh, it says like glue and something factory. So it's kind of like they're going to basically euthanize and kill and turn this horse into product and, you know, material, rather than actually take care of him and treat him inhumanely more than maybe Mr. Jones was. So they're doing exactly the things that the old regime was doing it, but they're doing it in their way and just lying about it constantly, constant gaslighting, essentially. And so even then, after that, they come up with the excuse and the explanation that, oh, actually it was a veterinary doctor who had purchased the old cart of the animal, you know, Terminator abattoir and glue factory that had forgotten to paint over that new sign. And so therefore he was actually brought to the veterinary hospital, was given the best medication and best care by Napoleon himself, apparently personally, but unfortunately he succumbed to his wounds and passed away. And everyone believed in it. They're like, ah, yes, of course, it was a different cart. And so, you know, it's just so sad and brutal to see. And so, anyway, I don't want to give out all the details of this book, but it really does reflect, you know, the era of the Soviet Union. And so, how does it end? Well, the ending is actually my favorite part. It kind of says, you know, time goes on. Napoleon gets, you know, to be a large, round, fat pig, and all the pigs at this point are kind of large, round, and fat. People were uncertain if there was any quality or improvement of life, because at this point most animals that were alive couldn't remember time before the revolution, and they just kind of lapsed into this state of apathy. And so, you know, it just seems to be this system where, you know, they say how to be and what to do and all these ideals, and no one ever actually like thinks about it or does anything about it. You know, they say they're all equal, but of course some animals are equal than others. And so the final like kind of peg is when they rewrite the entire Seven Commandments. They remove the monument and the, you know, of Major, apparently. They remove his monument that they would walk by every Sunday morning. They remove their traditions. They remove their you know, ideas of revolution, rebellion. They remove their symbols. They even changed their flag to be more appropriate and palatable to their neighboring farms. And what I love is the final scene where, you know, they take apparently the sheep into, you know, the pasture or the countryside, and they are doing some kind of special training. And I thought they're going to slaughter all of them or something, but no, they're training the sheep in some way. And when they finally come back after their training, what they notice is a certain morning, there's something very odd that happens, something that no one has ever seen ever in the history of Animal Farm. And in the early morning, like summer days, a pig was seen standing upright on its two hind legs with its, you know, with a pipe in its mouth and a dinner jacket and a top hat. And what happens is, you know, all the animals are aghast, like, no, this can't be true. This is the number one rule that can't be broken. Know that, you know, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. And so the sheep come out of nowhere and they start chanting 4 legs good, 2 legs better. And so they had been preached at and told in secret to chant this mantra, so that they repeat it over and over and over again, so that no one would protest. And suddenly all the pigs were standing upright. And so while the lives of all the animals remained pretty much the same, if not worse, you know, Moses the crow still preached the same tales about Sugar Candy Mountain. You have the donkey, who still was kind of just an observer to the whole affair. And finally you have you know, the pigs who now walk upright. And they said nothing much had changed except that the fact that there were many more pigs and many more dogs, because there was much more thinking to do and much more rules to enforce. So they were always happy, but everyone else was essentially miserable. So it was very beneficial for the few and not very beneficial for the rest of the farm. And I love the way the book ends, where it basically says the animals go and look in through the window at the dealings, and what was happening is that the other farmers were coming over, the human farmers from the Plinkerton farm and Foxwood, and they come into the dining room, of the new farm, of the old house, and they basically start having beer and card games. And Napoleon Bates makes a big speech about, they're very glad that they can now do trade together and enrich themselves and their countries. And the other farmers say, you know what, we're actually very impressed that you got the animals on your farm to work so hard with so little and for so little. And they said, we're actually so impressed, we might actually do the same things in our farms later. And they basically say, we were wrong about you. We thought Animal Farm would be a revolutionary, backwards, destructive idea of animals leading animals. But we see at the end of the day, you were actually quite like us. And in the haze of the kitchen lights, to the other animals, it seemed that the upward walking pigs had turned into humans themselves. And that's the end. Anyway, really great book. Again, it's a really interesting thing how, some people say that communism is capitalism in a nicer mask, and this kind of really explains how that occurs and how that happens. That basically, you have revolutions built on good ideals and intentions, and if you don't hold the people in charge accountable to those ideals, then, essentially the same power structures just occur over again. And so you have all this suffering and plague and destruction for essentially nothing. The revolution and all the people who died and fought for it, what became of it? What was their sacrifice for? And what I love, at the end of it, they actually revert the name of Animal Farm back to Manor Farm. For in fact, it was Manor Farm all along. And so Napoleon and Squealer, who was kind of his main he would check up on the animals at night and reinforce what they had been told and investigated them. They essentially just became as corrupt, if not more corrupt, than Mr. Jones was, and they just replaced the power structure. So they traded one tyrant for another. And I don't know, it makes me think of things like the American Revolution, and how people were worried or thought that the Americans in their revolution would, the idea that George Washington would declare himself King of America, that was an actual thing that people thought might or would happen. And I think it's so interesting that there's this moment where he kind of lays down his sword after some major battle and becomes a citizen of the United States. He says, I don't want to be a ruler. We are actually a country for the people, by the people, and I am one of the people. I am not better than any one of you. And so I think of that as an example where the leader actually follows through with their ideology and actually delivers on it, that it makes everything come together essentially. While you have the other regime where they fight for the revolution, in Russia, and they say everyone's equal and that everyone has to work and do labor, but then you have one class of people that absolutely does nothing. And the whole thing about the communist regime was that everything was privileges. Well, you see, I don't actually have more than you. I just have the privilege of access to an automobile. I just have the access to the better doctors or spas in town or whatever. And everything was two-faced and just an overall gaslighting big lie. So it's interesting to look at it and boil it down to a very simple farm scenario, to have the different classes of people and characters categorized. And again, what I love about this book, honestly, is that it's so simple and also so child-friendly. I mean, okay, there's some animals who get their throats ripped out, but it's actually very, very like just very child friendly. Like a child could read this and comprehend it and be like, okay. Like I would recommend this to kids, honestly, because it's very simple to follow. They won't get all of the overarching ideas, but they'll get the general idea, which is really the point. Like, and again, this is super, super thin. I read this in like an afternoon. I highly recommend people read this because I think it's a great piece done very well, and frankly better and more useful than 1984. Animal Farm is way up here, 1984 is not. So yeah, very impressed. And the entire time, it also reminded me of, like, I don't know, I just imagined it in the animation of Charlotte's Web. That's how it was playing in my mind as I was reading it. Because there are some kind of funny little scenarios, interactions between the animals, and you can really see how, you know, the horse would be interacting with the ducks, and the ducks with, you know, the dogs and the cat and stuff like that, and how, again, you personify the animalistic qualities in people. Anyway, yeah, great book, fantastic book. I love this cover. I love this tassel. I love everything about this. It's very, very nice. And yeah, that is an absolute read. So be sure to pick that up. I'd absolutely recommend it. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much it. And as always, keep on reading. See you later. Bye.